But you should have some things like your peas, carrots, onion, potatoes, rutabaga, your spices in one little bag, a couple of napkins. This can be messy at the table. Some crisp bread. This meal is eaten often with crisp bread or rye bread. And then there are small containers that have mustard and horseradish that you will enjoy when you eat the soup, and lingonberry and sour cream. And they go with the dessert. I did warn you, and I'll say it again, do not mix up the sour cream with the horseradish. Because you'll notice. Before we start, I need to give you a little background on Swedish pea soup. The Swedes and the Finns have been eating pea soup on Thursdays for almost 800 years. The Swedes eat yellow pea soup and the Finns eat green pea soup. And it's served in the majority of restaurants, at schools, in the military, in work cafeterias, every Thursday. And if you go to the grocery store, you can even buy yellow pea soup in a tube. Sweden and Finland were one country at one time, which is why they share many of the same customs. Now, let's get to the church part. Catholicism arrived in Sweden in the Middle Ages. And up until 1520, it was the church's practice to fast on Fridays as a reminder of Jesus' suffering and death on Good Friday. Therefore, the practice of loading up on pea soup and Swedish pancakes the night before started and has continued for almost 800 years. Pea soup was cheap, it could be made in large quantities, and it's high in protein and fiber. However, in 1600, Sweden became Lutheran, but people kept eating yellow pea soup and Swedish pancakes on Thursdays. In the mid-1700s, the king also decreed that Swedes and Finns would eat pea soup every Thursday. So they've continued to do it all this time. However, they have not continued to be regular church goers in the meantime. I think about 2% of their population attends church regularly, even though the Lutheran Church was the state church of Sweden until the year 2000. After Lutheranism arrived, they became quite anti-Catholic. Interestingly, in 1977, they finally had legislation that banned took away the ban, abolished the ban on Catholic convents. And even today, it's a monarchy. The monarch must be Lutheran. And it wasn't until 1873 that it was even legal for a Swede to be Catholic without threat of death or exile. And until 1951, which is even after I was born, Catholics were forbidden from becoming members of the parliament, teachers, physicians, or nurses. So it really has a rather strong religious background. Now, if you had time, you would have washed your peas in something like a sieve and then put them to soak overnight. Now I'm going to move my camera down. And I did a little experiment for any kids. This is the same amount of peas, and you can see how they soak up water. And I'm actually making half a recipe today. I've made a few recipes in preparation, so I have some in my freezer and refrigerator yet. After soaking, it's a good idea to go in and spoon out any of the hulls or any little pieces of things that might be left. I did find these peas were very clean, however. It hasn't been true of all peas that I've worked with. You take your peas and the soaking water and put it in your soup pot. Boing. And you simmer the peas alone. Now, not all peas are the same. I found these peas get soft a lot faster than some I've had. And if you had whole yellow peas, they would have to simmer even longer. So you'll put these peas you've soaked overnight on the stove and let them simmer. For about 30 minutes. And you might want to check them because as you cook peas, a couple of things can happen. If you cook them too long, or if you cook them long enough, they turn mushy. And some people like mushy peas. If you really cook them a long time, they sort of turn to brown water, and some people like it that way too. I actually prefer mine to be a little pea looking, a little more firm. So we'll put those simmering.
Cindy, it's Kim. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Cindy, can you hear me? It's Kim. Mine foamed up like crazy. So what is it? Is it starch in them? Do you know what is
it? My guess is that it's related to fiber, but I actually don't know.
Foam up so much?
It was sort of like when I cooked my meat, it really foamed up. And then I cleaned the foam off.
Should the peas be covered?
Pardon?
Should the peas be covered?
When you simmer them?
Yes.
You know what? It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I usually simmer mine because I don't like stuff popping up and getting my stove dirty. Or I usually put a lid on it, I mean.
Answer.
I also have my meat cooking, which has been cooking for a couple of hours. You do not have to have meat in pea soup. You can have a vegetarian pea soup and it's just delicious. I forgot to show you a couple of things. This was the mustard that I put in. It's made in Rockford and it's a stone ground mustard. It's called Bochi.
Bochi's.
Bochi's is the best.
Is it the best? Good. I think so too. These are the Lingonberries. Now, Lingonberries you will find at Hy-Vee and a few other grocery stores, but they consider them, you know, an item they don't keep all the time. So I did go to a couple of Hy-Vees and I bought what they had on the shelves. So I have plenty to get me through for a while. And I love, this is the crisp bread that I put in your packet. And if you haven't, you know, if you'll find this at Hy-Vee and it's delicious. If you put meat in your soup, it's ham. Karen, can you tell people what you put in yours instead of ham?
Oh, I did put a ham hock in mine.
Oh, you did?
I did.
What did you tell me that you had put in before? Were you the one that told me?
Yes, I've used a smoked turkey leg. And
was it good?
Worked out fine, yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I went to do my shopping, I have always made my soup with salt pork. And
finding it.
Pardon?
Good luck finding it.
You know what? Hy-Vee just got some in, and so I bought 5 packages, and I have 4 in the freezer.
Wow.
This is salt pork, and it does have a lot of fat on it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I cook mine, I don't cut this pork up. I leave it as it is because then you can take and slice this up when you're ready to eat your soup, and you can have a slice or two with it. Or, people that really like it can have 3 or 4 slices, and people that look at that fat and think, don't take any of it. But usually, I use salt pork. You can use any kind of ham. This time, what I did was I got hardwood smoked uncured bacon ends.
Oh,
And I tried that, and it's okay. I like my salt pork better, but this is what it looks like. So this has been boiling away for a couple of hours. It's done.
I would just like to say, I thought I would try the pork hocks, which I have never cooked before. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try it this time. And I got them and I cooked them yesterday. And the whole thing was sort of creepy. And I cooled them, put them in the refrigerator and cooled them overnight. And then when I went to get them out today, of course, because there's so much bone to them, it was all gelatin. And then there were these hocks in the center that the meat wasn't, I couldn't pick it off. It wasn't very tender. And so I went with the smoked pork chops we had for lunch.
Oh. Yeah.
The pork hock, Linda, I could almost become a vegetarian after cooking those things. They were really, really creepy. Creepy is the only word I can say.
Well, I cooked my meat a day early as well, and when I took it out today and cooled it off, it was I did pick off some of the fat that was on the top, a lot of the fat, and some people like all that fat in their food. I just decided I didn't want that. So there was an advantage to cooking it the day ahead of time. Definitely. I have never done it with pork hocks. But Karen, you did, didn't you?
Yeah.
I did a ham hock today.
Or ham hocks.
So that would be, a ham hock is smoked, isn't it? So it's already cooked, I think.
It is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, see, mine were raw and
Mine was raw too, but I cooked it.
Oh, okay.
Well, so the next step. You've all maybe chopped up your vegetables.
Yep.
By the way, that rutabaga is really hard to chop up, isn't it?
Nah.
Nah.
Not if you have a sharp knife.
Yeah. Well, the next thing we need to do is we just need to sort of saute these, put a little oil in. Dump your veggies in. Take it to the stove.
I have one question for you, Cindy.
Sure.
If you forgot to soak your peas overnight, what's the minimum soak time?
You know what? You don't need to. You just simmer them a little longer.
Oh, okay.
And I think these peas are just fine with that. They were. So we'll let that go for a little bit. Martha Booth.
Or boiling.
Martha, can you tell us what you do with rutabaga?
I'm unmuting. We chop it up and boil it and then drain it, add butter and sugar, just a tiny bit of sugar. And we mash it a lot of times. And then we just eat it as a side dish. We always have it at Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, always.
I think you may be the only person I've ever met who regularly eats it.
We love it.
I have never cooked with it before in my life. Never cooked with it before, ever.
Yeah.
Me either.
I've never even seen a rutabaga before.
I've never cooked with it either.
It's a nice root vegetable, and being Swedish and English, it's in our family.
Mm-hmm.
We've had it in stew before. In fact, I think one year that was one of the assignments we had for my daughter's class. Everybody had to bring ingredients for stew, and we ended up with rutabaga. So I had to learn what it looked like at that point.
Often people add leeks or turnips, which are other root vegetables, in addition to the rutabaga. You know what that stuff is on the outside of the rutabaga?
You said wax.
That wax?
It's wax, yeah.
It is. It's paraffin wax. I'm going to step over here and stir my veggies.
I was gonna say, if you hadn't soaked your peas overnight, you might want to boil them first and then simmer them.
You could also put celery in if you wanted to as a vegetable. I have an uncle, and his name was Ole. That's probably not a surprise, is it? Ole was in World War II, and he was captured by the Germans and spent time in a concentration camp. And when he came home, he said he would never touch another rutabaga. And that was because, first of all, not only was rutabaga served every day as soup in the concentration camp, but many, many poor Germans who were food deprived had to eat rutabagas all the time. And so they always associated it with never having enough food. And I don't know why if that's why my family never ate it much or whatever, but he just never wanted to see another one. If you look at the paper that was in your bag, there are several other yellow pea soup recipes, and you may see other spices that you prefer to use, and well, you may see other things you prefer to use too, but we are just using the cloves and the thyme today. And when you'll be able to taste both when the soup is finally done. You do another stirring here. I have 3 sisters, and they're all sort of smart aleck at various times. And when I told them I was going to be doing this, one of my sisters said, "Have you ever watched a cooking show? The whole thing?" And I said, "No." But I can now say I have, because I watched Karen Carver make nut rolls. So I probably won't do this as a second career. One of the other things, I don't know when you like to salt and pepper your food. Some people prefer to have it done at the table. You can do it either way. You can have people salt and pepper their soup at the table, or you can do it ahead of time. You know, it seems like more and more people are not using salt if they can possibly not use it at all. So you can make that decision. When I was trying to prepare for this, I went out to buy my yellow peas. I went to 8 grocery stores and the Asian market, and I called the Indian market, and I called the Mexican market, and I called 2 more grocery stores, and none of them had yellow peas. So I just called my daughter, and she just helped me out. We had to order them on eBay, and we bought them in 4-pound bags. And then I did a little research about why there might not have been any yellow peas, and I found out that the popularity of yellow peas has just shot up. You know, some people are eating healthier, but also they're adding it to nutrition bars, protein drinks, and just pet food and other things. I also found that 17% of the yellow pea production in the United States goes to Food for Peace. And that's a program the United States has to feed people around the world who are hungry. And if you'd like to do some interesting research, I suggest you look at that. Food for Peace began when Eisenhower was president. And it's probably not the most efficient or effective way to spend money on feeding people at this point. So, that might be an interesting thing for you to look into. Peas came right away on eBay. They were there in 3 days. And where's my bag? This is the brand. And I think these peas were grown in Canada. Okay, now we're going to add our meat and broth and vegetables and spices. So go ahead and add those unless your peas aren't ready. Then you'll have to wait a little bit.
We add them to the peas?
You add them to the peas that are simmering, which may or may not be done simmering. Take a look at them and see if they're soft. If they're not, wait a little bit before
You add them with the cooking water, Cindy?
And leave the cooking water. Yes, leave the cooking water in the peas.
Okay, 4 cups.
And I'll move my camera. Well,
I'm gonna do half of this and half water.
Okay, can you give us a shot of what your pot looks like, Cindy?
sure.
I can judge how much liquid I need.
Oh, you know what? Here are my peas now. And most of my liquid is gone because I think I forgot to turn them on simmer. But you can keep adding liquid whenever you want. Some people like a real thick soup without much liquid, and some like a lot of liquid. That's where your own personal taste needs to take over. And I've got that foam and I'm just mixing it all around there.
Say chicken. That's beef. I know, but that's also, that's what you're Yeah, we got a bunch of it.
So here are my veggies. I'm going to toss them in. And then this is what, let's see if I can get it down here. This is what my meat looks like with the broth.
This is gonna be barely big enough for all this.
So since I'm doing half, I'm gonna just put in a couple cups here, maybe. Maybe I'll put in more.
Spices yet, Cindy?
Pardon?
Have you not added the spices yet?
I'm putting the spices in next.
Okay.
Yep. So this is what I'm looking like now.
Yep.
Did you see it? Oh, I better, oops, pour it out. That's what I look like now. Got my
Cindy?
spices all, yes.
Sorry, Cindy, it's Kim. How done should the vegetables be just now?
How what?
How done? Yeah.
You know, they say to just heat them for about 5 minutes.
Oh, okay,
And,
fine.
and I think that, you know, that doesn't get them done, but I think it brings the flavor out. So here I've mixed my thyme and I've mixed my cloves, and I'm going to put that in.
So that's the little packet you gave us, Cindy?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
If you're like me, some of those spices you've got in the cupboard are, you know, 8 or 9 years old. So I thought I'd get you some fresh. If anyone just loves to look at cookbooks, you can borrow this one from me. It's called Yule, Swedish American Holiday Traditions. And it has lots of cooking in there and stories to go with it, like most good cookbooks do now.
Oh, come on.
I'm looking at mine and I'm going to add a cup of water. And I'm going to cover it and just let it simmer. With the increased use of yellow peas, farmers are learning some things too. Most of the farms that grow yellow peas, are in the upper western states. Montana and North Dakota are the leading producers of yellow peas. And yellow peas need a sort of a moderate amount of rain, of precipitation. And they're planted at the end of March and they're harvested in the first week in August. And for farmers, that's nice because they're not doing other things at those times if they have other crops. The peas do better than corn and soybeans in colder conditions as well. Many farmers who care about their land are doing some things like rotating crops or leaving land fallow, which means sort of letting it sit. They have found that rather than just leave it sitting without planting anything, if they plant peas, the peas put nitrogen back into the soil. And it's a rotation crop that they can use with winter wheat or oats or something like that. They harvest it just like we harvest soybeans. If you want to go to YouTube, you can watch some harvesting. How are you doing out there?
Good,
Doing great.
yeah.
It looks delicious already.
Well, you know, there are a couple things. It stays in the refrigerator real well, and you can freeze it real well.
I need someone to come and do the dishes for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I put a lid on it?
I put a lid on mine.
Yeah, Linda, put a lid on it.
Yeah, put a lid on it. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Do you love those people who review recipes and tell you everything they changed
Yeah.
so that it's hardly recognizable as the same recipe? Somewhere between when I got home from church and when I started making soup, we lost your spice packet. And so then I thought, oh, no big deal. I have those spices. I didn't have any ground cloves, so I just used pumpkin pie spice. So we'll let you know how that turns out.
Hey, that's fine.
Martha,
Yeah.
I have your spice packet. I have 2 in mine, and I thought, well, surely you don't put both in, because I could tell they were the same thing. So I've got your spice packet. Sorry.
No, I had one. And I emptied that bag, and I don't know where it went, but
Okay.
I'm good. I had time. I just didn't have ground cloves.
Pumpkin spice should work. Pumpkin pie spice.
It's
I
just
think it sounds great.
has cinnamon in it too. So in addition to the cloves and nutmeg, I think.
Nutmeg, yeah, nutmeg. Heather, are you making bread for dinner too?
I am.
What time will it be ready?
About 3.5 hours from now, which is what I started now.
A couple of other things.
3 loaves.
Ooh. Couple of other things I do. I have, this is my compost jar, and I keep it right by the sink. And you can see I have some things left over. These are biodegradable doggy bags. And even though the derecho took out my compost setup, I'll set it up again. I have several of these bags filled out in the garage in a container that the animals can't get into. But I do try and save my compost things that way. I love my birds, and I save all my eggshells. And after they dry, I put them in the oven for 10 minutes on a low temperature to kill any germs. And then when we get I don't know, maybe within a month, I'll crush these up, and I'll probably add them to some bird seed, or just perhaps put them out on a plate for the birds, because the calcium is good for them when they lay their eggs. It's similar to, those of you that raise chickens on the farm, you fed them oyster shells, and that strengthened the eggshell. So
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Animalistic, I'm sorry.
Get up instead of down.
I really like that idea of using the
Okay, well, it's 5:30.
compostable dog bag. We have a
Say, it's 5:30, we'll have soup.
compost bucket, but we didn't line it and would get just nasty.
I don't know if you want to try it, I guess, because. Yeah.
There are also biodegradable and or compostable compost bags. If the doggy bags are not the right size for your container, you might find there are just whole lines of biodegradable bags for trash and compost and you name it.
Where do you find those? I've looked for them.
Online. And if you just type in, biodegradable compost bags, you're probably going to come up with a bunch of hits. Because I remember when I still walked a dog twice a day, I went looking for those doggy bags and discovered a whole plethora of products.
Uh-huh.
I bet the doggy bags are cheaper.
I don't know. I mean, from inch for inch or ounce for ounce, I'm not sure that I saw much difference.
Well, for dessert, you have, and you can make more, but you probably don't have the iron. We have wafflers, which are like little waffles. And you put your mix, after you get your mix, you put it in a waffler iron. And It's not a regular waffle iron. It's not as deep,
Baking bread.
and it has 5 hearts.
Right there. Certain.
I have one that I got at Vesterheim, and I think I paid $60 for it. And a week ago, I found this one at Goodwill for $4.99, and it works just as well. This is thinner than a waffle, and it's a little sweeter than a waffle. And it's eaten in Norway and in Sweden. When we visited some friends in Norway, she was a mother and she had children, and they just kept their waffler iron out in the kitchen all the time because they made them all the time. So this recipe is pretty easy, 6 eggs, and I would recommend 6 big eggs. Let me move my camera down a little bit. And you add a 1/2 cup of sugar. And that famous spice, cardamom. Oh, that smells so good.
That's different. Tastes nice.
This is what cardamom looks like. It's used in a lot of Scandinavian baking.
Yeah, I can understand the thing.
And you just beat these things together first.
On the right, corner on the right. Video or something like this.
Then you take your flour, your 1.5 cups of flour. Add a teaspoon of baking powder. Oh, it's talking to me. And be sure you mix that baking powder in. Put that in. The egg mixture. Beat it in. Can you smell your pea soup yet?
Oh.
I can smell it in the other room.
Oh.
And then, of course, we add that favorite ingredient, more sour cream.
Yes. These are the little waffle-like things you've got there.
Put lingonberries in it.
Yeah. You put the lingonberries on, and then the sour cream. Hello.
It's just another suggestion to mute so that we can hear Cindy's instructions.
And with the sour cream, we have 1/2 cup of butter. Doesn't that all sound good? And mix that up. When I do this with kids, I always use a hand beater so they can have that experience. So here is our dough for the wafflers, and you let it sit for 30 to 60 minutes. 60 is even better than 30. And I just happen to have some that's been sitting. Here it is. And my iron is hot. I dip out about half a cup. Put it in my iron. And close it.
I just tasted my soup and it's really, really good.
Oh, good. I could eat it almost every day.
Just Thursdays.
Yeah, I know.
Because it really is a threat. It's a tremendous economic threat. And then we built the military, but it's a tremendous economic threat. These are the convictions that define our movement today and must define the Republican Party and the.
Can you see the steam coming up?
Yep.
You know, this is the waffler where you can set the temperature, and
Not quite
it sometimes talks to you when you're done, but here it is, and they're hot. And that's the best way to eat them, actually. The ones that I gave you have been frozen, so you want to put them in the microwave for a little bit. And then break them apart. And you've got your cute little hearts. So that's dessert. We're not doing Swedish pancakes because I don't think they freeze well, and I don't think they would bag well. So we're doing wafflers. Okay, another little tidbit. Waffler Day is March 25th in Sweden. And we're going back to religion again. Actually, it's Waffler Day, March 25th in Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. March 25th is the Feast of Annunciation, when Gabriel came down to tell Mary that she was going to give birth to Jesus in 9 months. And in Sweden, it's also called Our Lady's Day or Vårflodagen. Well, Vårflodagen sounds so close to Waffledagen that they made the transition. And until it marks the beginning of spring, and until 1953, it was a public holiday. Oh, I can hear. It's ready. There's more. So that's the waffler that you have. If anyone would ever like to borrow my waffler, you are welcome to do so.
Oh, yes, indeed.
We may have to have a drive-in waffler morning on March 25th to celebrate the day.
Why not? Like a plan.
Now the next thing that I want to show you is the way I often make my soup. I take the beans, they've been cleaned, dump them in the crock pot. Two or 3 cups of water in. Take my vegetables, but instead of thyme that's dried, I have fresh thyme that I have tied with string, and I'm going to throw that in. And I have the rest of my vegetables. And the other exception is that I've taken my onion and I stuck whole cloves in it. And I throw that in. And then I add my salt pork, not boiled, just as it is. I see how that sits in there, and it looks like that. And I'm going to add more water. I'm going to add water to at least cover it all and come up a little more, because remember how those peas soak up water.
Mhm.
Oh, here the lid is. I put the lid on the crock pot. And I take it over to an outlet. I turn it on low and let it go for anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. I apologize for the screaming out of the basement. Someone's watching the basketball game. Okay. Yes.
I said, oh, good. It's not just me. There's screaming coming from my basement too.
Okay. Understandable. Sometimes, not sometimes, probably 4 or 5 years, I've made yellow pea soup for the Sons of Norway. In December, we usually do it. And I use my crock pot. That's my method of doing it. And I always have a vegetarian and I always have a meat because people are eating differently and people really like vegetarian yellow pea soup. The other thing that we do is that we have, and sometimes you can go to IKEA and get a Swedish mustard. A lot of people take and just dribble mustard along the top of their soup, and that's how they eat it. Okay, so the last thing that we have to do, if you're Swedish, there's a word called fika, coffee, and we're going to make some coffee. And the coffee we're going to make is from the Lutheran Church Basement Women. I don't know how many of you grew up Lutheran, but I recall this very vividly. And oops, I've got my ingredients here. Now I have some water boiling for this. And this is also called egg coffee. You take an egg, and these, I don't know if you can see the color of these. These are just beautiful. The Proctor girls who go to our church raise chickens now. They moved out of town, and I don't know whether they're in Toddville or right outside of Toddville, but they raise chickens and they sell the eggs if they have extra eggs. So this is one of their eggs, and I just love their eggs. So for this coffee, you take and you break an egg, and put it in a container, and add the shells. Take your coffee, ground coffee, put in as much as you want. Looks like I got maybe a couple tablespoons. Take and add just a little water and mix it up. And someone said this looks like potting soil, which it does. There we go. It's like that. It still has the shells in it. And we're going to add this to a pot of boiling water that I have. And this coffee is so smooth. It is delicious. Ooh, hot, hot, hot. So I had just dumped it in my pot. And I'm going to let it sit for about 3 minutes. Turn the heat way down. How's your soup looking?
It tastes delicious.
Is it ready to eat?
This is Kim. Mine is done. I did mine with bacon. Dan said, how could you go wrong with peas and bacon?
Yeah.
I think that the cloves actually really make it seem Scandinavian to me. My mother always put cloves in her chicken noodle soup, and don't, I think, but the cloves make it of that part of the world, it seems to me.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is good. I didn't add any salt. I figured my ham shank had enough.
Yeah. Well, I have some that's left over from when I made it earlier this week. And I'll show you what that looks like. Whoops.
You know, Cindy, by my count, I'm glad this is good freezable, was easily freezable, because you've got what, like 3 batches? You're gonna have pea soup for you and John for, you know, several months.
Yes. Now, some of you know my John and know his eating habits. His favorite food is a bowl of cereal. So I'll probably eat most of this, but I love it.
Oh, I love your hat. That's cute.
I think I'm going to turn my camera around. I'm going to show you some Swedish things that I have right here. My grandfather was an immigrant. My grandmother and grandfather were immigrants from Sweden. And, oh, let me get it out of here first.
Can I ask about the mustard and the horseradish?
Sure.
Where does that come in?
Well, I'll show you. I'm going to take my bowl right over here. And what you do is you dip the tip of your spoon in the horseradish, take some soup, and taste it. Mmm. Now you have to like horseradish, I admit that. You can do the same with your mustard. Put a little bit on your spoon, dip it in your soup. Mmm. And that's what you do with it.